UST-as-a-service, Pulsar Finance, the first Nebula Clusters, and a whole bunch more. This is the Lunar Orbit Podcast. Today is Friday, the 22nd of April of 2022. Now slap that like button and let's get into it.
Charlie, there's a new joke going around. Have you heard it? What did the five fingers say to the face?
What?
Slap!
The first thing I wanted to cover in today's show is the ongoing expansion of UST. It's a bit of a recurring theme, and this tweet from LE Jimmy from the Prism team brings this further into focus. So what Jimmy is referring to here is this governance proposal about UST using Ondo Finance, which is these guys here. Ondo uses risk tranches to incentivize liquidity. Tranching is a traditional finance primitive that's used extensively, and it's a way of fixing risk for different parties. So usually you have a low risk tranche or an A tranche, and that gives you a fixed yield. And then you have a high risk tranche or a B tranche, which potentially picks up much higher yield, but also has a lot more risk involved. So the idea behind using Ondo Finance means that the community pools, the Terra community pools, can be used in a very low risk fashion to help provide liquidity to new protocols. So they're dubbing this UST-as-a-service. And this provides a win-win between Terra and upcoming protocols, especially other stablecoins, because there's very little risk of impermanent loss because the two stablecoins in theory should stay close to the peg of $1, resulting in no impermanent loss. So the Terra community pool is going to be providing $20 million worth of UST or any protocol that wants to bootstrap itself in a UST pairing. And these pools will last for a fixed duration, like 3 months or 6 months, before they can be revisited and maybe spun up again. But primarily, they're going to be focusing other stablecoins, at least initially. As Jimmy points out here, Sun UST, which I believe is the new Tron stablecoin, USN, USDD, USDN, and Silk, including Thor USD, etc. So it's another fantastic way for UST liquidity to get more out there in other networks. And it's also another good way for other stablecoins to bootstrap themselves off of the power that is UST. The deeper the liquidity for UST around in crypto, the stronger it's going to get. And that actually helps other projects use it as a form of bootstrapping themselves to try and gain some of their own market share and get themselves up and running. And you can start to see there's a considerable focus to move away from Tether and USDC from the crypto industry itself. Clearly, the industry wants to get further and further decentralized as it gets bigger, and that's probably a safe thing to do. So it can't be as easily affected from poor regulation and censorship. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was a couple of interesting tweets put out by the Terra Money Twitter page, particularly this one. Things are going to get spicy real soon. Bearers beware, UST and BTC. A lot of people concluded after reading this that it meant there was another Bitcoin buy coming, but looking at the LFG reserves, that hasn't happened, at least not yet. We're still sitting at about 1.7 billion in Bitcoin. But looking at the LFG reserves, it looks like that hasn't happened yet. We're still sitting at about $1.7 billion worth of Bitcoin. And this tweet from Eddie here is highlighting the fact that there is the Binance Bitcoin UST pool that's about to launch. So it could be relating to that. And quite possibly a similar pool might be getting set up on FTX after $250 million was transferred from the LFG accounts to FTX. On top of this, there was another cryptic tweet put out by the Terra Money page. Shout out to the lunatics in South America. Let's take things to the next level. They're talking about here and if it's somehow related. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Before I continue, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Hi, I'm Gerry, host of the Lunar Orbit Podcast, where I provide regular alpha and updates on all things Terra Luna. And if you enjoy this content, consider supporting the channel by smashing that like button, hitting subscribe, and hitting the notifications bell so you get all my videos in a timely fashion. Okay, moving right along, the next thing I wanted to dive into was the Nebula protocol. Now, I covered this recently in a previous podcast, but since then, their airdrop has gone live. So if you've been staking any Luna at all, either directly through TerraSwap or on Stata Labs, you should have some Nebula token waiting for you. And when you first connect to the Nebula website, you should get the airdrop pop-up appear in the top right hand corner, and then you can collect your NEB tokens and start staking them. Now the NEB token hasn't gone available for sale yet. They're having a liquidity bootstrapping pool, and I'll probably cover that in the next podcast. Reading this tweet from Nebula though gave me a bit of a jaw drop moment when I realized the potential of this protocol. It's going to be far more than just an index protocol like I first thought. And the proposal for the first Nebula cluster is now live. This proposed cluster aims to provide downside protected yield bearing exposure to Luna, while also benefiting from the yield-bearing interest rate within Anchor Earn. During a 45% downward correction in the price of Luna, the cluster should only lose about 15% of its value. protecting you to the downside, but also giving you upside exposure if the price increases. Now, they go on to explain how this could be useful as a form of collateral within something like the Edge protocol, or maybe even Mars. If the cluster token was used as collateral, we wouldn't need to pay back any of the loans, withdraw any collateral, or do any rebalancing ourselves. The cluster automatically rebalances for us. If the Luna circulating supply decreases, cluster gets weighted more towards Luna. If the circulating supply of Luna increases, it gets weighted more towards AUST. The same thing happens in reference to Luna's price. Higher Luna price equals more AUST, essentially taking profits. Lower Luna price results in the buying of cheaper Luna. This is similar to a rebalancer bot that you might find on KuCoin and in the roadmap for the Nexus protocol. I can see this being very popular as a really good way for people to stack Luna and be a bit more conservative with some of their gains, but still remain a lot of upside exposure while limiting their downside. So just that alone could generate quite a lot of volume and liquidity to flow into the Nebula protocol. A lot of lunatics do this sort of thing manually by leveraging off of the Luna and UST pool on Astroport or TerraSwap, but it's a very manual process. You really have to time your entries and exits, and having something that automatically does this for you while also earning anchor earn interest and be used as a single collateral type is going to be very enticing for lots of users. Moving right along, I wanted to introduce another new platform that has announced itself. Pulsar Finance have given us a sneak peek of what to expect on their platform. Now, looking at this video that they've put up on Twitter, looking very much like a similar offering to something like Zapify or DBank that you see across many of the other chains, or Apeboard if you're familiar with that, which is basically a platform to monitor your portfolio, to make swaps and trades, deposit into different DeFi offerings, follow and track your NFTs, and something like that is going to be super useful to simplify everything for a lot of users. Having a one-stop shop for all your Terra DeFi offerings is going to make life a lot easier. So we're suddenly seeing there's a lot of these tools, if you like, coming out. We're seeing the Leap wallet building a lot of features into their new wallet as well to simplify things for users. We've got Apeboard, as I mentioned, and now it looks like we're going to have Pulsar Finance. More competition is always healthy, and often it pays to be an early user in a lot of these things, especially if they ever tokenize down the track. So keep that in mind. Once Pulsar goes live, try and look at doing a few swaps and using their platform, and you never know, sometimes you get an airdrop just by being a user. Okay, now onto a bit of Terra Hopium. I thought this tweet was quite interesting. As you well know, Bitcoin and its supply cap is a bit of a meme about there being only 21 million Bitcoins, and someone's crunched the numbers here on how many Luna you need to hold to have the equivalent of holding one Bitcoin in terms of the total supply. So the equivalent of holding one Bitcoin now is a bit like holding 34 Luna. Now, no one's actually saying that the price of one Luna is going to equal one Bitcoin, but hey, you never know over time. It is a very deflationary asset, so who knows? But the point remains, if you want to own the same percentage of the Bitcoin network by holding one Bitcoin in the Luna network, you would need to hold 34 Luna. So about $3,000 US current market value. And this tweet here also highlights the fact that we've now just reached an all-time circulating low of Luna, and the Luna burn is back into effect, and the last few days of Luna burn has not been due to Luna Foundation Guard burning Luna to mint UST, as it often has been in the last couple of months. So this is organic demand coming from other sources. And again, the more UST that is minted, the less Luna that's available for people to buy. And if the demand for Luna stays constant, yet the supply drops, that can only result in positive price appreciation. Not financial advice, of course, but things are looking encouraging if we keep having this organic demand for UST. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and maybe consider watching one of my other videos.